Добрый вечер, дорогие друзья. Меня по-прежнему зовут Аслан Тусубжанов, а я приветствую вас на шестом дне фестиваля Go Viral 2020. Друзья, уже прошло 5 дней фестиваля, позади ровно половина. И давайте я вам расскажу, что мы успели уже сделать за это время. У нас за 5 дней было 9 лекций, 10 воркшопов, 2 обсуждения, 2 показа фильма, одна сессия спид-нетворкинга, а также одна панельная дискуссия. Это почти 20 часов стриминга, 16 часов воркшопа, 1,5 часа обсуждения и 1 час нетворкинга. Это очень-очень круто, дорогие друзья. Но также приветствую наших зрителей на платформе Facebook Live, кто смотрит нас там. И поделюсь тем, что на Фейсбуке у нас более 20 тысяч просмотров и более 900 репостов. Это очень и очень круто и замечательно, дорогие друзья. Огромное спасибо всем вам за то, что вы смотрите нас, за то, что вы вместе с нами, за то, что вы активно участвуете в нашем фестивале. Давайте немного расскажу вам о том, что будет происходить сегодня, на шестой день фестиваля Go Viral 2020. И еще час, хотя чуть меньше, еще 45 минут будет доступен для просмотра фильм Жанат Алшановой «История цивилизации». Фильм это можно будет посмотреть по ссылке в утренней рассылке, которую мы сегодня вам утром выслали. Ровно в 7 часов начнется встреча с автором этого фильма Жанат Алшановой. Эту встречу будет модерировать Мади Мамбетов. Сегодня также у нас пройдет 2 воркшопа на платформе Zoom. В 7 часов вечера Кэти Джиори расскажет о демо и советах для физических вычислений и технологий умного дома, о которых вы должны знать. И в 8 часов вечера по времени Алматы Антон Уткин расскажет о нарративной виртуальной реальности как передовой способ рассказывания истории. Ну и сейчас, дорогие друзья, у нас первая сессия сегодняшнего дня, и спикером будет Билл Олет с темой «Шагая вперед» с дисциплинированным предпринимательством во время кризиса 2020 года. Давайте немного расскажу вам о Билле. Помимо того, что он является предпринимателем, он известен тем, что по всему миру он поменял понимание и подход к обучению предпринимательства. Он имеет ученые степени в таких университетах, как Гарвард и MIT, имеет более 25 лет успешного опыта работы в компании IBM, а также трижды за всю свою карьеру занимался предпринимательством. Его книга «Дисциплинированное предпринимательство», которая вышла в 2013 году, была международным бестселлером, а также была отмечена огромным количеством наград за то, что в очень простой и легкой форме преподнесла людям саму идею предпринимательства. В 2017 году вышла уже вторая его книга под названием «Рабочая тетрадь. Дисциплинированное предпринимательство». За многие годы он был спикером на многих международных семинарах, конференциях и мероприятиях, и наш фестиваль не стал исключением. Итак, дорогие друзья, Билл Олет. Good afternoon, Bill. Bill, hello. Do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you very clearly. Bill, how are you today? How are you? Where are you at the moment?
I'm in the middle of the woods in New Hampshire, and it's hard to get internet
Oh,
sometimes.
oh, really? Well, I'm happy to hear that there is any internet in the middle of the woods. That's really, really nice to have internet in the woods. What time is it? Where are you at the moment?
It's 8 o'clock in the morning.
So
It's
good,
like 8:15
good morning
Pacific.
to you. Top of the morning, as they say.
Yeah,
It's a late evening. So thank you, Bill, very much for joining us, for having time to speak about your subject, to speak to our audience. Just one last thing that I want to remind our viewers, dear viewers, if you have any questions, that you want to ask Bill, you can write them in chat right under our live stream. And in the end of the session, we will have a Q&A session where I will answer the most interesting and pressing questions from Bill. Well, Bill, the floor is yours. You can take on the presentation.
Yeah, thank you. And I would love to have questions. That'll make it more interesting. I'm just going to have a few introductory comments.
Yeah.
And we have, how long do we have? A half hour?
Yeah, around something like that for a presentation, maybe a little bit less, and then we'll have a
Okay.
session of Q&A.
Great, great. Well, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be speaking to you all. I have never been to Kazakhstan, but I have a number of students. I just won yesterday. We were going through his plan, and it's a real show of force that first of all, entrepreneurship is now everywhere. It used to just be in Boston and Silicon Valley and a few other places, but now it's everywhere in the world. The second thing is, this COVID crisis has made it such that we can communicate with each other, not just technologically, but it's socially acceptable to communicate in this way. So literally, I'm in the woods of New Hampshire. There's nothing around me except for moose and bear and a lot of chipmunks right now.
Oh,
But I can communicate with you, and that's really quite interesting.
yeah, that is amazing.
So what I'd like to do is just share with you things that we talk about in the classroom at MIT in the first, in the first day of class in entrepreneurship. Can you see this?
Yes.
You can see it? Good. So we talk about entrepreneurship, and entrepreneurship is a really cool thing. When I graduated from college, I didn't even know what entrepreneurship was. It wasn't a viable thing. It was kind of like it meant you were unemployed. But today, entrepreneurship is a very valid career path, just like being a doctor, a lawyer, working in a big company, working in the government. Being an entrepreneur is not only an acceptable career path, it is a cool career path. It is a desirable career path. And I just want to take a few minutes to just talk about what do we really mean by entrepreneurship? Because MIT is a school of engineering, and the first rule of engineering is define your terms before you start solving a problem. So I think there's kind of some misunderstandings about that, and I'm going to go through here and define some terms that I think will help us in our discussion. And it's very important to level set. The first definition of entrepreneurship that I started with when I started teaching accidentally 10 years ago was it's the formation of a new venture that produces a product where there was no venture before, there was no organization before. And it produces some product, which could be a service offering, but it's replicatable. And that product creates value for someone, and then you extract value from someone for the value that you've created. So you create an economically sustainable new venture. That's the definition of entrepreneurship that I started with. So it is based on the market concepts of, cash in equal, cash in is more than cash out. So that allows us to sustain. We're going to talk about the purpose of, purpose-driven entrepreneurship and why that's important if you'd like. But that's the original version. And so what this leads you to is startups. But as we've kind of ventured here over the especially past 3 or 4 years, entrepreneurship has become much more than just startups. And we have come to believe that entrepreneurship is about a mindset, a skill set, and a way of operating. So for our course, when I teach entrepreneurship now, I don't just equate entrepreneurship equals startup, because that's not what we teach. What we teach is that we want to create anti-fragile humans. These are people that, in the absence of structure, in the absence of clear direction, these are people in adversity, in crisis. They get stronger. These are the people who don't just take an existing organization and optimize it and make it more efficient and make it more predictable. That's management. What we're talking about on the other side here is entrepreneurship, where we create new opportunities, we create new organizations, and we create those in an environment of adversity and chaos and imperfect information, and often in crisis, as you're seeing right now. And so this anti-fragile term came from a book by Nassim Taleb called Anti-Fragile. And he described it as people who grow when exposed to volatility, randomness, disorder, stressors, and love, adventure, risk, and uncertainty. So 2 points to that. First of all, they have the mindset to enjoy a challenge, enjoy a crisis, enjoy adversity, to say there's an opportunity there. And secondly, they get stronger when this happens. So anti-fragile is not just resilient. I keep doing what I'm doing. I had a plan and COVID came along and I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. That's not anti-fragile. That is resilient. That's the neutral condition. Fragile is when I had a plan, COVID came along, boom, I broke. I didn't know how to handle adversity. Resilience is the neutral condition. What we're talking about is people who actually get stronger in the face of adversity. And, I don't know sports figures in Kazakhstan, but we have many sports figures in the United States like Larry Bird and Tom Brady who get better as the game gets more complicated, as the challenge gets bigger. As adversity hits, they get stronger. And that's what we're trying to teach people in society. So adversity is an opportunity, and it is not something that we shy away from. Adversity is part of creating a new world that's better than the one we have today. So let me just stop. Am I going too fast, or is this okay? Is my pace okay here, or is too fast?
Yeah, the speed is fine. You're doing great. The speed is fine.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. So let me just quickly go through, and I can give you a website where you can find a paper on all this. People often equate entrepreneurship with SME, small, medium enterprises. And these are, restaurants, little, small IT service companies that service their dry cleaners, there's nail salons, there are dentists, the local doctor. Those are all entrepreneurship because they created a new organization, but they are specifically focused on a local market. And therefore, they're basically service companies. And this is what people often equate entrepreneurship to. These are very important entrepreneurs. They're very important companies. They're very important organizations. But they have a certain characteristic that is different than what I'm going to talk about next. The characteristics of these organizations is that they produce a product for a local market. Therefore, they're capped out at how big their market will be. But the good news is that when they try something, they can get very rapid response. If I'm a dentist and I put another seat in, I will get more business. If I'm a restaurant and I add some more room, another table, all things being equal, I will get more revenue very, very quickly, and I should make more profit. And you can see this growth as people do it. It does not require relatively as much investment to make these businesses successful, because it's very clear who their customer is and they respond very, very quickly. On the other hand, what I want to talk about, and this is often called gazelles or high growth businesses, is innovation-driven enterprise. And these focus on markets that go well beyond the local market. These are going after global markets. They produce a product that will sell beyond Kazakhstan, that will sell beyond Boston, that will sell to a much broader market. And they can do this because they have some innovation in it. And that product is unique enough that people want it on a broad basis. And the nature of those companies is you don't get the innovation for free. You have to invest time. You have to invest a lot of effort. You probably have to invest some money to be able to do that. So relative to the SMEs, these will go down and they're going to require some investment. But when you hit them, they will grow exponentially and the cap will be much, much higher. Essentially, there's no cap to them relative to the local market. And they're a beautiful thing because you make money while you're sleeping because your product just keeps selling. On the left-hand side, on the local market, you're basically a body shop where you are continuing to have to work to produce more revenue. But once I have product, I can sell that, I can be asleep, and I can be getting revenue. So this seems there are a lot of advantages to this. You do have to invest more money up front, but you do have this high growth potential and high upside. And these fundamentally transform economies because they create exports. Now, but when we look at this system, there are some downsides here. You have to make this investment. And that means your response time when you make an investment to see the results is much longer. The cause and effect are much, much different. And there's a lot of risk associated with it when you do this. But that's the nature of what we're going to be focusing on is these IDE enterprises. And that's what we do at MIT. So now I just use the word innovation. I just want to clarify, innovation is used all the time now. And when you ask people, what does innovation mean? They'll often say invention. It's something new to the world. That's not true, because an invention, a patent, a technology, coming up with a new idea, that takes time, that takes money, that takes effort. So you're spending money on the invention. But on the other hand, an innovation is something that makes you money. So we can tell right away that these are not the same thing because the units are not the same. You know, they're not creating the same effect. So something is missing here. And the difference between innovation and invention is the fact that an innovation is an invention that has been commercialized. In other words, it's found a customer, it's found a use that will generate value for the world. And that is what makes, that's what makes an invention useful. That's what makes it an innovation. And this is not well understood, because people tend to think that patents are valuable. Patents by themselves are not valuable. They have to understand what they're useful for, and then that becomes an innovation, and someone has to be able to apply that. So in societies and companies historically have overinvested in invention and underinvested in commercialization. And the commercialization side of this equation is the entrepreneurial process. And that is, how do we take an idea? How do we take a technology? How do we take a new process and figure out where does it generate value and make that an innovation for the rest of the world? But it's hard to measure that, and people don't understand that as well as they do a patent, number of PhDs and things like that. But just, to put this in perspective, how important is the commercialization process? Is it really that important? And the answer is absolutely. When you look at the evidence, Apple is the most valuable company in the world now, or in the United States. And it is built off utilizing other people's inventions. The Macintosh computer, which has fundamentally changed the computer industry, was not their idea. It came from Xerox PARC. Xerox PARC was incapable of commercializing it. And so it was Apple who did that. Likewise, when you move forward, when you see the iPod, the fundamental invention there is the MP3 technology. That was not invented by Apple again. That was invented by Fraunhofer Institute, but they were unable to commercialize it. So my point, and by the way, we can go on and on with examples. Google, the fundamental breakthrough in Google is not their algorithm. It is AdWords. And AdWords was something that was invented by somebody else. It was Overture, and it was Google who commercialized it. So the bottom line, my point here is that commercialization is not possible. It's not possible to create innovation without an invention, but we dramatically underestimate the value of commercialization, and we shouldn't do that, because if you look at the evidence, it is where value is created, and that is the entrepreneurial process. One last thing is, when we talk about invention and commercialization, I just want to also make the point is it's not enough to have good invention and good commercialization, as we did when I worked at IBM. The key is that these two things have to work together. You have to have them not iterating once, but iterating on a rapid basis between each other. And the clock speed with which you can go between, that's a new idea, to testing it in the marketplace and we have new requirements, to inventing something new to meet those needs of the requirement, and do that over and over again, is the essence of successful commercialization process, is the essence of successful entrepreneurship. As Thomas Edison said, if I wanted to measure innovation, I would measure it by the number of times I can iterate on a new idea within the first 24 hours when you have it. So what is entrepreneurship? Initially, it was starting new ventures. Then what we focused on is it's actually a mindset, skill set, and way of operating to create new opportunities. And how do we create new opportunities? Or We can create them kind of in a standalone local basis, which is good, or we can create them with innovation driven them, which will have a much broader impact. And then what is innovation? Innovation is invention times commercialization. You need both of those. And the commercialization is what we're really going to focus on. And then you have to integrate those together. So lastly, the last thing I'd just like to comment on is that's what entrepreneurship is. What is it not? What is it not? And I just want to talk about, actually 9 untruths about entrepreneurship. The first is entrepreneurs are mercurial individualists. The evidence is quite clear that this is not true. Sometimes it might be true, but the Hollywood version is not true. The more founders you have, the more likely you are to be successful. If you have 2 founders as opposed to 1, you're more likely to be successful. If you have 3 relative to 2, more likely to be successful. Here's the bottom line. Entrepreneurship is a team sport. It is not an individual sport, despite what you'll see in the movies. The second thing that people often rewrite is, I was successful because I was so smart and I was high achieving. Again, the evidence does not bear this out. You have to have a certain level of intelligence, but successful entrepreneurship comes not from intelligence and being good at everything. It becomes from really getting obsessed with one thing and doing that particularly well, and in fact, better than anybody else. So if you are, the highest grades and everything, you're probably not going to be a good entrepreneur. You have to be focused about what you do. And just to give you a quick example of that, when I was, my second company was called Sensible Technologies. And I was not the greatest engineer by any stretch in the world, mechanical, electrical. But once I got into that business, I learned everything you could know about force feedback, and I studied it every day. I wasn't just passionate about it, I became obsessed with it. And so while I was not good at everything, I was really, really good at what we were doing. And I certainly wasn't the smartest. The third one is I can't be an entrepreneur because my parents weren't entrepreneurs. I don't have that gene. This is just not true. Entrepreneurship is not a gene. It is not something you're born with. It's not nature. It is in fact nurture. And when you look at this, you see that entrepreneurship can be taught and it can be learned. And we know this because the evidence shows that the more times you're an entrepreneur, the more likely you are to be successful. And when you understand that it's a team sport, there is a role for everybody in entrepreneurship. Everyone can be an entrepreneur. There's no doubt in my mind, and history bears that out. The third one is entrepreneurs. I can't be an entrepreneur because I don't love risk. Entrepreneurs just love to take risk. This is fundamentally not true. Entrepreneurs love to take informed risk, and there is a big difference between informed, measured risk than just risk. With this idea that entrepreneurs will take dumb risk, just count on luck, it's just not true. What entrepreneurs do is they understand there is no safe haven, that you have to put yourself out there. And when you do, you need to find situations where you have an unfair advantage, and that unfair advantage tips the scales in your favor. It doesn't guarantee that you're going to win all the time, but it does give you the odds in your favor. So in no chance, in no world would a smart entrepreneur ever go in and play this silly game at a casino, because your odds are just so clearly against you. When you look at what entrepreneurs do, they go in to play games where they have some agency over it. They have some effect. There's a movie called 21 about the MIT blackjack team. Those people became entrepreneurs. They were willing to take risks. They would go to the casino, but they would very disciplined about it. They would play one game, and that was not this game or one-armed bandit. They would play blackjack, because when you have blackjack, you can make decisions to improve your odds. They would then, then the odds aren't in your favor, and they would count the cards. But they did it in a very interesting way. that people did not understand at the time. They had an insight that nobody else had. They had an information asymmetry. What they did is they had a female on their team and she would count the cards, and nobody ever thought that a female would count cards or could count cards, and she was counting the cards and getting it back. They couldn't figure it out. That little insight allowed them to flip the odds of playing blackjack and casinos to their favor. Did that mean they won every time? No, but they won a lot more than they lost. And that's what I mean by entrepreneurs don't love risk. They are willing to take informed risk, and they find situations where they have an advantage and the risk is in their favor. And let me just say, there is no place in the world where there is no risk anymore anyway. Entrepreneurs are successful because they're charismatic, and I can't be an entrepreneur because I'm not charismatic. This is just not true. When entrepreneurs have to produce real value, if you kind of manipulate someone and get them to buy a product because you're charismatic and it's not a good product, that will actually kill you, because you are trying to build up a reputation. And if you sell someone a product that's not good for them, they're going to get out and write bad reviews. They're going to start negative word of mouth for you. And your reputation is incredibly important as an entrepreneur. You don't have big sales forces. You don't have a brand. You're trying to build this up. And so, you could have 10 great customers and then you sell someone a product that's not a good fit for them. And that's going to wipe out all those good customers and the good reputation you've built up with one bad one. So you do have to have people who can interact with customers in a constructive way, but to make it manipulative and that you're very good at kind of, get charismatic to have them buy a product that they don't really want, that is not going to make you successful in entrepreneurship. 6, entrepreneurs are just lucky. Well, we just have this, we've given a lot of talks about this. Luck favors the prepared mind. If you are prepared, you are much more likely to be lucky. And there's a great book by Malcolm Gladwell where he talks about this called Outliers, where the people who saw things coming, be it online computing or whatever, they said, that's going to happen in the future. And what I need to do is get prepared and get my 10,000 hours that Malcolm Gladwell talks about. And so when it finally happens, I will be there to do it. There's a famous ice hockey player named Wayne Gretzky, who wasn't the fastest skater, wasn't the most physical, didn't have the best shot, but he was the best scorer of all time. And someone asked him, Wayne, why are you so successful? He said, because it seems to me most people skate to where the puck is. I try to skate to where the puck is going. And so when you see entrepreneurs and you think, they're lucky, it's actually a very calculated, anticipation of where things are going and spending the time to do that. Okay, let me just wrap up here. I think one of the ones that became really clear to me that I didn't understand until I became an entrepreneur is entrepreneurs are undisciplined. When I was at IBM, every day I had to dress up in a suit. I wore a tie, black wingtip shoes. I was always spot on time. I would never say the wrong thing in meetings. Everything looked fine. And then I did my first company, and I realized that none of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was did the customer buy your product, get value from it, and pay you, and then buy more and tell other customers about it. All this other appearance stuff does not matter. And how people look at entrepreneurs sometimes and say, wow, they're not disciplined, just is really doesn't understand the incredible self-discipline they have to focus on the most important things and not get distracted by those things that aren't. It takes incredible discipline to be a successful entrepreneur. You have to be willing to be different. You have to figure out what matters and what doesn't matter. And but once you decide what matters, you have to have incredible discipline to focus on how do you get that mission done. The last 2 things I just want to mention are that people believe that, and I hear this every day, entrepreneurs fail 90% of the time. It's really hard to be an entrepreneur. It's like, well, that's just not true when you look at the data now. I put out a paper on this on our website, which I'll give you in a second. And that it shows that our entrepreneurs now are succeeding at a rate of 75%. And I would argue even the people who aren't successful, they're succeeding and that their businesses are still going after, sometimes, 8 years. But what it means is that, it's not as hard to be successful in entrepreneurship as people would tell you if you learn how to do it. If you understand the fundamental principles of entrepreneurship and you execute them with discipline, your success rate is much higher than what people would have you understand. Here's another book by Malcolm Gladwell called David and Goliath. It's a biblical story about this giant Goliath, and nobody wants to fight Goliath. And they finally get this little guy, David, to fight him. And they're like crazy. How could David ever beat Goliath? And Goliath says, come out and fight me. And David says, no way, I'm not coming out and fighting you like the way you want to fight me. I'm going to change the rules here. I am going to use a slingshot and I am going to hide behind trees and rocks and I'm going to shoot at you. And he says, no, come out and fight me like a man. He says, no, I'm changing the rules. And David slays this enormous giant Goliath. And people go, oh my God, what an unusual situation. And it's actually not unusual, as Malcolm Gladwell points out. In military battles, it's the David that beats the Goliath when they change the rules and do it and they execute it with precision over 60% of the time. The Americans had no right beating the British in the American Revolution. The Vietnamese had no right when you look at it. The Americans were the Goliath, the Vietnamese weren't, but they did. And over again, you see this. David can beat Goliath in fact, there's a lot of advantages to being David if you execute with precision. The last thing I'll just say, and then I'll turn it back over, is there's this obsession with the original idea in entrepreneurship. And let me just say, the most overrated thing in entrepreneurship is the original idea. It will not be correct. It might be a little bit correct enough or whatever, but research shows by people like Matt Marks that the original idea is just a starting point. And then you do this thing called switchback until you figure out who's your customer, what can you do for your customer, how does your customer acquire it, and your idea has to change. It is never correct. There's a great book by one of the co-founder of Netflix named Mark Randolph, and the name of the book is called That Will Never Work. And he goes through the whole book and he talks about how the original idea for Netflix would never have worked. None of their ideas worked because it's just the starting point, and then you have to figure out what's good about it and what's not. So in this success pie here, the original idea is necessary, but it is the least important thing. You have to figure out who is your customer, the market, and then you have to understand them, and then you have to execute against what they want until you figure out what the product is. And the most important thing is your team. Can you develop a team that has a common vision? That means we're all going in this general direction, we don't know exactly what that is yet, and it will change over time, but we have a common vision, shared values, and complementary skills. And that is the most important thing. But the original idea is not. Don't focus overly on having to get your idea perfect up front. It's not going to be that idea is not going to be right. It's going to change over time. Focus more on who's our customer, and then how is our process going to be executed against this to get to the right product? And most of all, do I have a team that I want to go into battle with? So with that, I will turn it back over, and hopefully I've stirred up some thoughts out there amongst people.
What entrepreneurship should be and how it should be perceived. I have a couple of questions from our viewers. I also have a couple of questions of my own. During your presentation, you were talking about the difference between innovation and invention, right? And
yes,
right off the bat, I thought about Tesla and Edison, and then you mentioned Edison later on.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
can we use the example of these two great men with great minds, as a difference between innovation and invention? Was the Edison the one that put the commercialization into the invention?
Absolutely. That's a poster child for it. That's a great example because Tesla just said, I'm right. My idea is better than Edison's. And he was more intelligent. He was a better inventor without question. But it was Edison who, even when he was wrong, he invented the light bulb. He invented the telephone, the telegraph. He invented General Electric. So when you say who had more impact on the world, who was an innovator, Edison is at this level, Tesla's at this level. Tesla is the prototypical inventor, whereas Edison is the innovator. He's not nearly as good a inventor as Tesla. He was wrong, fundamentally wrong on a few things, but he was the one who was able to commercialize. So a great example, a poster child for it.
Yeah, I think we've touched a very sensible subject for a lot of people because there's a lot of fan clubs for Tesla and for Edison himself. Also, during your presentation, you were talking about that entrepreneurship is not something you're born with, is something that you can be taught. But some people may argue that even though that some people learn entrepreneurship, not all of them become successful in their businesses. So maybe it's a character of a person. Maybe something in a character of a person, something should be there, so he will be successful.
Yeah. So look, people, I hear that a lot, but that presumes that entrepreneurship is an individual sport. And what we know from evidence is that entrepreneurship is not an individual sport. It has never been an individual sport, and it certainly will not be an individual sport going forward. Individuals don't get anything meaningful done. It's teams, it's organizations. Think about that. Can one person really change the world? Not unless they get help from other people, right?
Yeah.
So we know from evidence that founding teams are more likely to be successful. And even individual founders have to recruit other people. So if you understand that it's a team sport, then there is room for people who have different skills. Now, if you took Tesla and tried to make him that chief revenue officer, he wouldn't be good at that. But if you had taken Tesla and you had someone who was very good at the commercialization side and put them together with the designer, as you talk about here, then he would have been very good as an entrepreneur. But look, this idea that people can't be entrepreneurs, it's crazy. I mean, because when you go to a place, like Vietnam or Nigeria, people aren't dying on the streets saying, I need a corporate job. I can't function without a corporate job. They freaking go out there and they become entrepreneurs because they need to survive. And over history, you have seen people, they become entrepreneurs. Now, your point is, okay, does that make them great entrepreneurs? And the answer is no, it doesn't. But it makes them entrepreneurs and shows you they can get in the game. Now, through the education process of teaching them about the first principles of entrepreneurship, that's when we elevate their game. But to your point, I think it's really important to clarify this. You can't be all things to all people, but you can contribute to an entrepreneurial team, and understanding it's a team sport. Get with other people who have a common vision, shared values, and complementary skills, and there's always a position for you on the team.
Okay, thank you very much for that answer. One of the questions is, in the beginning of your presentation, you mentioned that the perception of entrepreneurs by society changed over time. Like if back in the day, if someone would say, I'm an entrepreneur, then someone would say, are you living in the box, or are you unemployed? What do you think happened? Was there any historical event or any event connected to big enterprises? What happened that this perception of someone who's doing a business changed?
Yeah. I think about that a lot because I'm much older than you or probably anyone watching this here today. I'm 63. Oh, look at the crowd's coming in here.
Yeah.
I'm 63, and when I came out of college in 1980, nobody talked about entrepreneurship, and then it just wasn't a thing. It just wasn't a thing. And then by the time I worked at IBM for 11 years, I played basketball for a year, and then I worked at IBM. in 1993, I came out and we were just starting to see entrepreneurship become something that was accepted by young people. It was never, to the day she died, my mother did not understand why I left IBM. She thought I was unemployed. And I was like, no, I'm an entrepreneur. And she just didn't, it didn't register with people of that generation. But what happened about 1993 was, Moore's Law happened, and you had role models in the United States like Steve Jobs, you had Bill Gates, you had Mitch Kapor. And we all saw people, well, not we all, in Boston, I saw Mitch Kapor. I was like, oh my God, look at this guy. He is doing such cool stuff. And why am I sitting here at IBM carrying a briefcase, wearing a tie and a white shirt going, and because he's doing business and he's doing really cool stuff. And why can't I do that? He's no different than me. I can see him. And so the impact of these role models for younger people in the 1980s just started to change things. So we all thought it was possible. And once we believed that it was possible, then Moore's Law with the computer revolution and IT was the camel's nose in the tent. It was the tip of the spear, because then you had Compact Computer, you had Microsoft, you started to have these other small companies just rising up and doing incredibly well. And then what happened after that is, I'll never forget the study that showed that all the net new job creation in the United States came from IDE startups, what I was talking about at the beginning. And so now the government's all in on it too, because we can't create the jobs by just waiting on General Motors to create the jobs. They're not creating jobs, they're losing jobs. We can't wait on the government. So young people started taking this as a preferred career path, and then the hierarchy started saying, hey, this is a good idea because this is the only way we're going to create new jobs.
Okay. I think we have time for a couple of questions.
Yes.
One question is, how often do you face failure in your job, and how do you deal with failures?
Yeah, so first of all, I hope I experience failure at least a few times every week, because if I'm not experiencing failure, then I'm not innovating, right? I'm a basketball player, and that's what I grew up doing. And if you make every shot you take, you aren't shooting enough. Is basketball popular in Kazakhstan?
Well, yeah, not as popular as football or soccer, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, I just talk about basketball. If I make every shot I take, I say, wait a second, did I take enough shots? If I made 20 shots, why did I know I couldn't have taken 30 shots and made all of those? So the whole point of being an entrepreneur and innovating is finding out what's new. How can we change the world? How can we make it better? And if you don't try things that don't work, if that's considered failure, which I think that is, then I'm not pushing the envelope. So I tell our team, we call it experimentation. I tell my team, I want you to try new stuff. And if everything works, that's not good. we shouldn't be doing stupid things. Let me be clear. Yeah. I'm not embracing stupid failure. I'm embracing intelligently looking at, is this now possible? Let's try it. Maybe we're too early. But even if we're too early, we're going to learn things that are very valuable and bring it back. So I prefer to think of failure as, I hate to fail, don't get me wrong. I think it should hurt, but I think that you should constantly experiment. You should not fear failure because it's part of the growing process.
Okay. Well, thank you. That was very wide answer to the question. And we have 1 minute. A couple of minutes, just one very short question. So we have a pandemic, right, around the world, and the lockdowns, and it's crisis for some. Should you start a business at this moment, or should you wait? As a general, or that depends on what kind of business you want to start.
Well, I would say first of all, you should. If you are an entrepreneur, you should. If you're not ready, then you shouldn't start a company. Yeah. But right now, the world favors entrepreneurs. right now the chess table has just been knocked over, and there are opportunities everywhere. And if you're anti-fragile and you have the mindset, that window just closed over there, that window closed, now something else has happened. Everybody's been counting on that window. If I'm an entrepreneur, I have an advantage over big companies because I can move quickly to find out where the new opportunities are.
Yeah.
So if you're an entrepreneur, this is a great opportunity. This is a great time to be able to find those opportunities before other people and start to exploit them. Now, let me just be clear. We never wanted, I never in a million years wanted a pandemic. But you know what? It happened. And now we can't wallow in the negativity of that. We have to say, that happened, it's real. How are we going to fix it? I teach a class at MIT called Hacking the Future, the fall of COVID. We're using entrepreneurial techniques to figure out how do we build the world back better after COVID, because it's happened. We can't, you can't cry over spilled milk at this point. So I think it's a very good time. And that's why I applaud you guys for what you're doing. An entrepreneurship should not be just at, in the United States. It shouldn't just be in Berlin. It shouldn't just be in London. It should be everywhere. It must be everywhere. We need people who are entrepreneurs everywhere in the world right now.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we don't have any more time. I just wanted to say thank you very much for joining us. That was a great presentation. Very interesting. It's good that it's morning where you are, so have a great day, as good as the morning that it is now.
Can I just mention that if people have questions or anything, there's a website where they can get all kinds of information. It's deship.com. If I put it in the chat, will people see it?
No. But I don't think that we'll see it now. We'll put it in our chat later on Telegram. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's disciplinedentrepreneurship.com.
Yeah.
D-eship.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much. We have to
Thank you so
carry on.
much.
Yes.
Congratulations on the Go Viral Festival.
Thank you. Bye bye.